Hello. Welcome to episode 6 of the End of the Beginning podcast. In this episode, we chat about slaying dragons, how external validation can have a positive impact, and fake it till you make it. We discuss speaking to the internal voice, accepting your own limitations, and the wonder of failing. We hope you enjoy what you hear, and if you'd like to submit any questions for upcoming episodes, please contact us at theendofthebeginningpodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.
So the premise being, I feel like every other episode starts with me redefining what we're up to here, which basically rejigging the language of the same thing, but giving full permission to go, actually, this isn't about making an interesting podcast as far as the content. This isn't about you and I articulating ever more cleanly the things that matter to us. That's a side project that is valuable, but it's not primary. The primary thing is let's use each other as authenticating devices to dive deeper and deeper and deeper and go, that felt 72% true. Let's try for 78 and so on and so on. And we get deeper and cleaner and more pure expressions of Lukeness and Paulness, and we get closer and closer, as close to the truth as we can get. And it feels true that we don't actually ever get there. Finger pointing at the moon. We're making an elaborate and nourishing and beautiful, sometimes exquisite, sometimes it's exquisite in its ugliness, and sometimes just its outright radiance, painting, fine art, throwing paint at a canvas of the divine, or of the only thing that really matters, and you might call that the divine, or of the thing that is lurking behind all things and doesn't have a form, and yet it encompasses all form. And the love behind all the machinations, and we are working each other into a lather, almost utilitarian, like we're utilizing this space to do that, and it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and that's actually all we could say, and then we could see what data we can harvest from there, like a spirit journey. Let's see what we can bring back for the village from that space. I think, again, that's a side project, just art for art's sake. What do they say? Like, there's the warrior paradigm, or there's the artist paradigm. And the warrior is about killing the dragon, conquering the demons, climbing the mountain, positioning yourself adversarially with something, usually your own stuff, to overcome. And then one of the ideas is as that burns itself out, you do that for so many lifetimes that you're like, man, they just keep coming, these dragons. This endless parade of different and yet somehow exactly the same in its way, dragon, this pattern, this routine, this cycle of slaying dragons. And I do grow heaps and all of that, but it's like to make it real, it feels like it has to be the big bad. But then once I do it, I realize it wasn't the big bad. There's another big bad. And so that opens the door for another understanding, which might be the artist's disposition, which would be, I'm just going to sit in the very middle of this creative process and coexist with the push and the pull and the inspiration and the repulsion. And I'm going to see get better and better at aligning with that inspiration and working with that repulsion, i.e. coexisting with difficult emotions and difficult phenomena as they arise. And then using it as fertilizer to move ever more deeply into that inspiration vein, that inspiration flow. And that would be being in the very middle of the artist's process. You never stop being creative. And then you could go, well, yeah, that's a really creative way to work with life. What else is creative? Well, God's creative. So then you are allowing creativity to become you. And so you are in training an aspect of God. The premise in the delivery, from when I first heard that sort of comparison and contrast of those two ways of being, was that one follows the other.
As in the warrior first and then the artist is...
Yeah, which is a really healthy discussion. I think really beautiful. And but I think it's perhaps not that linear. I think that, so the way I might hold it in my life in a real way, the way that it functionalizes, the way that I relate to that and experience that, I think is what I'm trying to say. The way that I experience those two things in my week, in my humaning, is that like I used to believe in enlightenment and now I don't believe in enlightenment. So enlightenment would be the dragon.
Like a fixed position that you're making your way towards.
Yeah, exactly. A fixed position. Yeah, that's beautiful. And yet life has forced me into integrating that doesn't serve me, which isn't saying it's wrong. It's not the same thing. And then going, wow, well, okay, well, I used to covet and prize and structure my life around attaining that goal, and no longer. Crossing that threshold really mattered. And everything was sort of a reflection point of that. It trickled into all things, and I kind of polarized my whole life around it. And then it all fell over in a way and had grief and had crumbling and disaster and ruin around it. And it sounds like really extreme, but there was part of it, was the grief around that. And then a remodeling of what things were, and then finding that, well, I'm not going to I just want to be in the very middle of my spaceship. I want to, in the yogic word, like I want to position myself in the best asana to adopt the most ideal posture to receive the next moment of human experience. I want to be so practicing surrender, but also aliveness to work with the staff and discernment around what's safe and what's unsafe. It's not much good positioning yourself to journey through the next spiritual opportunity of a human existence if you're not taking care of your humanity at all. Yeah. Because flesh is dripping off the bone and you're not going to be very good next week, and then you'll be creating extra layers to work through and stabilize. So going from being primarily driven by crossing thresholds, slaying dragons, to then being primarily driven by positioning myself in the very middle of this creative process for forever, that we never get it done, and then landing somewhere with a bit of both. So less linear, with a bit of both, a multidimensional space in which both are welcome. There are key thresholds to cross in your life. There are patterns that were incredibly impactful on your day-to-day, and your human relationships is usually my experience where we find these things. I used to relate to people in this way from this space with this amount of love, but this amount of misunderstanding. And as that misunderstanding begins to unravel and become conscious, something like realizing people-pleasing behavior and realizing, wow, for every granule of people-pleasing I'm doing, a space is taken up where real Paulness could enter, where real Lukeness could enter, and it's not able to. Because I do have a finite bandwidth of what I can squeeze in this time-space reality, into a moment of time, I can only feel so much at once, Part of being individualized into one person is that there's limits, beautiful, exquisite limits, so you can really experience something. Lost my thought a little, but so working out, I don't know where I was going, but the where there's both. So, the human patternings. So having a breakthrough and going, I don't feel the same anymore. Like if you really notice, I don't feel like I did. Something has shifted. I'm like, well, would I dare to say that? Would I dare to tell anybody that? Because I might be back in the same pattern next week. And usually we have a few of those, but eventually we cross the threshold and don't uncross the threshold. That's the nature of real growth. So threshold crossing, you can kill dragons. Dragons die, and they don't come back. That's a thing. Eventually, it's a thing. We do ascend to new plateaus of ourselves. Yeah. So that's a form of enlightenment. You cross a threshold you don't uncross. And it's also true simultaneously and in a really important way that they coexist, apparently like in dichotomy, that they coexist in an apparently contradictory and yet so beautifully symbiotic way, that you are also just perpetually returning to yourself and returning to yourself and returning to this moment to meet it. There's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do but to show up and meet it. But there's real beauty in allowing for both. And I don't require of myself to articulate it perfectly here, but I know I can feel that there's a resonance between being fully online humanistically and being fully online spiritually. Because the spiritually would just be, we're going to infinitely return. There is no crossing. From the spiritual point of view, there is no enlightenment because you were never unenlightened. God fell asleep because God chose to in the form of your individuation. It wasn't the absolute truth of God. God didn't actually forget. God gave itself the simulation of it, you know. And then humanistically, all this stuff's very real. When your child gets hurt, it's very real. Whatever courses through your nervous system in that moment, if your child breaks a bone or something, can only be met eventually, fully, because that is, to that part of ourselves, that is so real.
Yeah, I mean, the way I understand what you're saying would be something like, you know, and let me know if I'm off base or not, but it feels a bit like if you're not able to be your true authentic self, i.e., to me, that's slaying the dragon. So you're moving through all the things you need to move through to kind of shed layers, to, I don't know, people call it shadow work sometimes. Like, if you're not doing that, then you're never, ever allowing the hyper intelligence of this system of expansion. You're never allowing that to truly play out, because you're playing a character, or you're playing a diminished version of yourself, rather than taking responsibility for who you truly are, being okay with it and loving it anyway, understanding that you are not a complete work, but you need love and you need nourishment and understanding from yourself about being okay with all of that, and then moving into the world with that understanding and kindness to yourself.
So you're describing honouring the limited, finite human aspects,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. To your faults and to your miscomings, is that what it's called? Or
misgivings?
Misgivings, sorry. Comings and givings. And when you can truly do that, then you're allowing the actual natural mechanisms of expansion or evolution to play out. And without doing that, you're literally not interacting in the juice of evolution, because you're not bringing your fullness. You're not bringing the fullness of who you are to the table. You're going, I'm going to bring this one that I'm just comfortable with. Yeah, it's like, well, you'll get just 10% expansion then, because that's all you're bringing. You're not bringing all of your Lukeness. And it's shame and it's guilt and it's sadness and it's like, oh no, I'm hiding all of that stuff and I'm keeping it. Or in Paulness,
bringing it to where? To
the table, to every interaction with everybody that you're that you're interacting with, being unashamedly who you are. You know, and being okay with the fact that we all have faults, and being okay with the fact that we all have things that we're working on, no matter what, no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about the Ascended Masters vibe, and I'm not skilled, or I'm not read enough in that space to know, but you even hear of gurus and some of the things that go on that you are surprising, like. You
mean surprisingly human sounding and feeling behaviors from people who are perceived to be beyond that.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just think there is a mechanism that seems to play out naturally that is supremely intelligent, but it requires you to bring all of yourself unashamedly to the table and interact from there. That's what that feels to me like. Is that kind of describing what you're talking about?
I'm present to like an unapologeticness punching out of you, which is really cool. Really cool.
The courage to truly be who you are.
The most beautiful, the most I don't know, resonant or something. My favorite aspect of that, among a few, the bit that got me that I couldn't get off was at the start, where it's like that if I don't take care of this thing, or if I don't engage in this authentically, something like I really want to relate elegantly and supportively and nourishingly to the human parts, so that they can almost rescind their control and soften and allow something else to come through them underneath, where the real something, the real mystery can emerge, the real light or something. And that's not a new idea, but really beautiful. Yeah. I guess I'm also I can feel the power of it. and I don't need to give reflection on this. It's not what I'm trying to do, but what I'm in a functional way curious about then, it's like when I think we both know that bringing all of us to the table does not look like utter nakedness with all people.
No.
So can we speak to some nuance in that? So yeah, in your deep relationships,
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, or what I'm feeling in between the words, is you want to be as authentic as you can. You want to be in full naked relationship with yourself as you move through life. So what does that mean when you're relating to the full spectrum of different people across your week? It means that I'm going to be fully naked, fully engaging with myself and letting all of it up and out, which takes a lot of processing to be able to coexist with. I think thankfully less and less, or you just get more and more adept at processing in the moment.
I think the more you do it, the more burns away. So you carry less.
You carry less. I think you also get better at managing it in the moment, because the invitation is to never to require yourself to be seamless and fluid and perfect, because that would almost be the absence of personhood. There's no grate, as if a river is moving through a filter, like an iron gate, and it's like being removed. Now all can move through, and if the grate is the personhood, then we're sort of clearing the gunk out of it so we can work ever better with life, with the flow of the river. But if we were to take it out altogether, there wouldn't be a person there. So to give ourselves I'm going to retreat, actually. That's what feels really authentic. By allowing myself to be fully naked with myself, relating between human and spirit, you could say, between soul and God, maybe, individuation and the one. The truth is, in that relationship, is that I feel overwhelmed, and it's as if God's telling me to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
And
that
self-care
might look like withdrawal.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up.
Okay.
Because the self-care thing is really I think is really important, and something that I was very lax of in my earlier. It was always just give in my
Do you
younger
mean that
years.
in a last 5 years kind of way, or more like 10, 15?
10, 15. Yeah. I mean, and to a certain extent the last 5 years, but I think they're one and the same thing. It's all about starting to take care of yourself, and that means acknowledging the parts of yourself that you don't necessarily like, and being okay with them, and caring and loving them anyway, but then also caring for your state of being, your current state of being. I think my 2 cents on it is, like, if you have a friendship like we do, like you have a deep friendship, then that's when you need to bring those parts of yourself, those deeper parts of yourself, those parts that are ugly or that you don't like about yourself. If you can bring them to the table, then you get a reflection of someone that you trust, and you can work through those things. Sometimes all it takes is I do that all the time too. And
validation.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it all just drops away, and you're like, I'm not a weirdo, or I'm not. That doesn't make me strange, or whatever it is.
It's interesting, because that might be a moment of the validation you're receiving externally. For example, we were just talking about sanctuary. Paul and I just drove out to the studio together in the car, so we had a quick chat. And I was talking about something I'm moving through as sanctuary. And let's say in that moment, I'm trying to think what actually happened. It was probably a bit rushed, but I know that you're somebody who understands the importance of sanctuary. Like, I mean sanctuary. Sanctuary could mean many things. I mean it as far as, like, this is my home, and this is where all my energy is welcome, and also where I do my ordering, my calibration. It's womb-like. It's really safe. For me, I control sounds and smells and, I guess, light in a way. I'm very aware of the dark at home and how nourishing it is, that when I'm so grateful that the dark exists. It's almost like this childlike celebration or something, because it seems so simple. I'm not sure I've ever said that out loud, but I really do. So there's a sensory calibration in all of that. So coming back to what I was saying, like, perhaps it's true that Paul says, like, bro, that totally makes sense. This is your space. That is really, really important to you. And I can feel in your system that sanctuary is resonant, and, there's a form of validation in knowing that you get it. And it's quite simple. You're not like, I'm going to validate you, ready, set, validate. It's not a, mechanical process. But what is curious, sort of operating as a third party looking in on that dialogue, is that I wonder if the reason that feels good or might feel good in a hypothetical situation for anybody is because the validation you're giving me, I was unable to give myself because of overwhelm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So,
but I think if you don't have a reflection, how do you know whether that's just some neuro weirdness that you've got?
Totally, other people and connection and humanity and friendship are really, really important. But it might be because they can give you the thing that you can't give yourself in that moment. And yes, they can help you give it to yourself more often, which would be the growth bit.
Yeah.
But we're not saying that we will just ascend to a higher curriculum that's even more challenging. This is part of the nature of spiritual growth, is that as you slay those dragons, you do ascend to different dragons.
Yeah.
Which is why, this is convenient, why the sort of artist's disposition really matters, because it's like, it will be the big bad and you will ascend, and it will be all of those things, and all the reward will be there. The treasure of the new landscape of that higher level belongs to you. The Shakti will give it over to you. As you crown yourself king in this new land, which sounds self-indulgent, but self-realization is quite self-indulgent. But that, and then the work begins anew, and it's different stuff, and it's different rooms in the mansion of your inner world that you're opening up and clearing out, and it doesn't end. So it's new, but in a way that we're renewing our creative asana. We're renewing our posturing in our own spaceship to journey through the other things. So it's both the slaying of the dragons and it's the repositioning to receive the next moment for forever, just coming back to the middle over and over and over.
It feels naturally for me too that work needs to be done. That work, I don't know, I don't have a better word for it, but that interaction needs to be done without the then garnering of more dragons. You know, so you're not cleaning one room by just chucking a whole lot of shit in another room, you know.
It makes sense in a feeling way. Can you think of any examples?
Yeah, one would be, I don't know if this is an example of that or not. You'll be able to clarify for me. But they're kind of faking it till you make it. So you're pretending to be a way that you are not yet. And that then just creates more baggage for you to have to go through. So you're like, well, until I actually am ready to be who I am, I'm going to pretend to be this way, which looks like that, but it's not actually that. So you're not digging into deeper parts of yourself, exposing those really vulnerable raw parts. You're still keeping them at a distance, and in doing so, you're taking more I'm not worthy, I'm not on board, because you're yet to dig into those deeper parts. Does that sound? Again,
on a feeling level, yeah, I do. I think I know what you mean. The fake it till you make it thing is perhaps not all that refined in my system, because there was a time in my life where that was promoted in an institutional way as like, let's do the thing first and work out why we're doing it after, which was marketed as quite a Hindu disposition. But it's like anything in duality, it cuts both ways, and you can be really dogmatic too. So something like someone says, well, what's meditation for? You go, well, to have a relationship with self. You're like, what? You know, let's say greater than half of people, if you just threw that out there without any context, that's the sort of, it's ill-fitted. That would be the wrong way to introduce that probably. Similarly to a creature who didn't understand love, if you said, well, just love them with everything that you've got, everything that you are, and you're like, but what do I do? Like, you mean pick flowers? Like, how do I
express that?
Actually do? Yeah, so like, how do you be yourself or something like that? So I suppose like if you're gonna sit and meditate, and you might actually adopt the method, and in a way you are faking it till you make it. So like what's meditation for? It's to sit and sort of let all the distractions of mind and the kind of overwhelm of feelings unfelt, get all that processed, or create space for it to unfurl and not replicate, like thoughts just spiraling on thoughts, and just give them the space for your brain for them to arise and descend and dissolve, and give them the space to play themselves out, and the tension will recede. And similarly, emotionally, it's a different language that the emotional layer of us speaks, but it is similar. If you create space for it to fully be itself, then it tends to recede, and you realize, well, I'm not actually, sadness isn't who I am. It's a thing that I accommodate in the vessel of myself. It's a thing that exists transiently within me, like waves on the ocean. Same with thoughts. So all that would be like, yeah, and when all that stuff kind of disappears, there's this empty space. And the more I go there, I realize it's homely and incredibly resourcing and nourishing. And eventually sit there enough, and I mean, this is true from my experience, I suppose. I don't know if it is, actually, if I can say that objectively. But I do know that that's where I find myself. The most contact I can have with Luke is there. And that doesn't mean I only find it in meditation, but it means that in the emptiness of things is where I dwell. So, and I can get a deeper and deeper contact with that if I authentically meet the emotions and the mind stuff, if you like. And then you say, well, let's give you a structure to meditate. In a way, that's faking it till you make it to get in there. So I think there's sometimes like positive, it's sort of neutral in its way, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it can feel really jarring on this quest of authenticity. It's like, how do we really relate well when we're pretending to do a thing, when we're posturing? Something that came up this week from a third party, which I think is resonant to what you're talking about, is when you utilize a bunch of spiritual tools and perhaps an unconscious part of you, it satiates that and says, I'm doing these 5 things every week, which makes me a much gooder boy or girl than I once was, because I'm doing really good things that have positive validation shed on them by others. And so it's like, am I doing better? So like doing the thing, accumulating knowledge around spirituality, is it actually breaking through the egg of sorts for something authentically you to be born into the world? And if it's not, then there's little sprinklings of dogma accumulating. And if it is, then wonderful. But also the methods in time will fall away, which is the Krishnamurti deinstitutionalization dialogue. To me, anyway, that's the beginnings of that, where the method can actually fall away. So just like, I guess, maybe my version of that in my system is being discerning around what method is to us. Because you can have really deep spiritual, you can have really engaging intellectual conversation about spiritual method and about what's really going on and about our body of insights. But if you're not able to show up as yourself in that moment with, I was going to say like a power and a quiet connection with yourself, but it doesn't always look quiet too. Sometimes it could look noisy and turbulent, but it still be deeply authentic. But we can get lost in the language of spirituality and forget what it was for, which is perhaps a reasonable definition of dogma. Does that follow?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're sort of more talking to, in my understanding, more outward things, and what I guess I was referencing was more inward things.
Cool. Yeah.
But yeah, I understand the function of, maybe fake it till you make it's not a great example, but it's the best I had at the time.
Oh, I think it catalyzed some interesting thoughts for sure, or a conversation.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because like I feel like we started this, these chats just literally from, we have quite deep conversations, and we've spoken about this before on the pod, but we have quite deep conversations, and if we were going to do a podcast, what would we do it about? And it just kind of, it's naturally become just this conversation, this deeper conversation has become what it's all about. And I think there's like, it may be a cheesy metaphor, but there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
Like that's actually what your life is for, is having your life. The purpose of your life is literally you living it.
Showing up and being present.
Yeah.
Well, what's helpful to that end is the little reminders of like, well, we just answered why we're doing this. So why are we not doing this, I suppose? It's like, well, for the content to be exemplary. It's like, it is nice to listen back to things and go, I think that's really good. I really like that.
Sure.
I would consume that. I am consuming that with joy and even reverence in moments, because there are those sorts of qualities when I listen to it. I think this is so beautiful. But little reminders that this doesn't need to be anything in particular. And so we can afford to have to sit here and to be silent and see what arises. And
Imagine that.
yeah,
Like taking, peeling off those constructs that have been added to your need to have something you do be a certain way.
yes,
Like, holy shit.
yes. So what you were saying before about if I kind of get my ducks in a row, not a metaphor I like, but if I take care of myself really well, what comes to mind is like, I'll just finish the metaphor before I tangent off. If I take care of the pole of it all, the individuation, the human being, the finite bits really, really well, and I hold space for the mind to relax, and I create safety for the emotions to be like little children being welcomed in after a hard day of school, or a spouse who just only has the one place they really want to express this intense feeling, and it happens to be inside your container, and that being inverse both ways in different moments. And if I really take care of this human being, then something else can arise. And I think that's what we're trying to do in the pod, is like if we relax the little voices going, God, what if it's shit today? I don't feel as like naturally peaceful and happy as I did in another sitting. So that's going to affect things. That's me today. I was wondering like, I wonder, this stuff that I didn't get on top of in my morning meditation or something, how is this going to amplify, dull, blunten, make more eccentric? How is this going to affect it? And going, well, how does the higher part of me feel about that? It's kind of curious. It says, well, it's all welcome, but it's like, it kind of did it as well. It brought it all in. But like, these ingredients aren't mistakes. So let's meet them here and see what bubbles up. So coming back to what you were saying, like if we hold that beautiful posturing of self-care and taking care of that, it's like a human being is a vortex for source to enter this plane. So as you imagine the body as like a tripod for a big old vortex coming out of your solar plexus to enter this world. And it's so powerful that it'll just blow the thing over like a bit of paper in the wind. But if you shore up its legs and its steadiness, and if you shore up that tripod by taking care of the vessel itself, then the vortex can get its job done or something. The vortex can continue to flow.
It's just trusting in the process too, I think. Which is basically what you're saying.
Which is, that's to me the bit about like being open to this being an amplifier, or being open to just not amplifier might be too positive, because sometimes it's crashing and burning is exactly where something needs to go. And that's happened in this room, I reckon. I think that's what an early episode was in a beautiful way. And it's created a wonderful reference point for a lot of things. We're sitting on a couch right now, and I fell off the back of the couch and landed on this drum kit and got some metal in my kidneys. And
what a day!
What a day! And but it's created a lot. Anyway, just a hiccup that occurred, but has been grist for the mill. Has been wonderful fertilizer for predictable and unpredictable things to flower and be really, really additive in its way.
Yeah, I think too, like being okay with whatever comes. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Or at least it has been for me. I can only speak for myself. But it's like, you're
the
okay.
The bravest thing that there is.
You're okay if like nothing comes. It's like, well, maybe it'll be a bit shit.
Yeah.
So be it.
Yeah.
Like, how much power is there in that?
Right.
In the acceptance of your own mortality and your own limitations.
This is good. This is good shit. Because what that infers to me means you have to have something behind this. I can afford to fuck this up. There is nothing, and you know this as a creative better than I suspect, there is nothing that was ever achieved with maybe a divine spark or just a whole lot of power in the world, like a creative endeavor that was accomplished and was successful, you could say, whatever that means. But let's say we agree on what that is. It's a power to have impact on the one that makes it, or others, or change the world, or none of that was ever done without a person who wasn't willing to fail.
100%.
Got to be true, right?
Yeah.
And so what, from a spiritual point of view, from a healthy relationship with self, your word of the week, self-compassion, motivating part of ourselves, or the part that finds richness in self-compassion. What are you falling back on? Why can you afford to fail?
Me personally?
I don't know.
Or is that a...
It's kind of rhetorical. I suppose, but I'm butchering
for
the
me,
language a bit, but why, when you can say, like, maybe it'll be shit. Maybe it'll be shit. Really, really, really shit.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, why can you afford to be so comfortable with shit?
Because me personally, I know it's rhetorical.
Let's go for it.
I know it's rhetorical, but me personally, it's because I know that I can interchange the word fail with learn. Like, there's no learning without failure.
Yeah.
You can be taught something, I guess, by somebody, but in terms of like embodied knowledge and self-taught learning, it all requires failure.
Yeah, but if
I was talking to a friend about this the other day, and it was literally like peeling back why he was afraid to do something, and it got all the way down to failure. Like, terrified of failure, judgmental. There was a particular parent that was, quite concentrated on perfection, shall we say?
And they were the voice in his head.
Yeah, and so the failure aspect. As soon as you can release a fear of failure, understand that it's a mechanism of learning and evolution. I mean, it goes back to something I think a couple of episodes ago. It's like, your power is your perspective. Can you get a perspective to understand that when you have a perception of failure, you failed at that? Can you truly get to a place where you're like, that's stage one of learning how to actually do that, is to fail at it? Like entrepreneurs talk about it all the time. I couldn't play this song until I could. Like every time I tried to play this, I failed. But if I was that hard on myself, I never would have learned to play that song. Never would have learned, never would have expanded into whatever it was that you were chasing. So comfortability and failure is, in creative exploits, I think, is paramount.
Oh my God, it's intoxicating. It's so powerful. I think the essence of any kind of like self-empowered, self-loving understanding of how to interface with failure, which is, you just gave your version of that, which is really powerful, which is recalibrating, you're talking about perspective. So adjusting the perspective to accommodate this as what wonder could come from that failing. So I could meet that if I needed to, which you want to leave space for success too. I suppose it does open the door to say, well, it's going to be a success no matter what. And that's beautiful. Perhaps perspective is directly linked to the amount of expansion you can bring to a moment. So you might say, like, you could be really excited about the learning from failure in a moment, like authentically thrilled. But that would probably take a lot of vibrational expansion. You'd have to be really... Do you think expansion needs some explanation, or is that just a bit of a given, or it's too abstract to explain anyway?
I mean, I'd love to hear where you're going first, and then maybe we can
see if it's required.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So perspective is such a powerful piece in that, because it informs what's possible. And if I can hold it in a new way, new things can come. If I think a thing, I couldn't play that incredible lead break until I could, and now I'm a different guitarist. The perspective has shifted. So it's almost like, to me, you're pointing not just to a perspective of intelligence, but a perspective of soul, a perspective of like more of the soul has integrated into the human, the personhood, and now it can hold a bigger idea of itself. There's a beautiful extract from Conversations with God, a Neil Donald Walsh book from the 90s that was beautiful in, earlier chapter of my life. And I won't get it exactly right. It's in some of my writings as well, quoting it, because I do love it. But the greatest the greatest limitation in your, Skeletor, the greatest limitation in your life is the highest functional idea you hold of who you are.
Say that again.
So I'll try to requote a bastardized version of it. The greatest limitation in your life is the highest idea, the highest functional possibility of who you think you are.
Yeah.
Slightly different language. It was better the first time, but I can't remember the words.
I got it.
It's a tongue twister.
I got it the second time. I wasn't listening deeply enough, I don't think.
So who do you think you actually are?
Where have you placed your limits?
Yeah. But okay, where have you placed your limits? Like, what do you mean by that? Because that would mean different things in different contexts. I know what you mean. But where
how small have you made yourself?
Exactly.
If you are Skeletor, Gigantor, if you are massive, have you made yourself small?
Definitely. But more. Like, what about in the spiritual plane?
No, I mean all of it.
All of it.
Yeah,
So
I mean all of it.
So, are you the child of God? Are you a kind of expression of God, limited by your individuation?
Yeah.
Are you a servant of God?
Yeah.
Are you just a man sack of meat?
Yeah.
Meat sack of man. I don't know. Woman sack of flesh. But including, trying to be inclusive. What
about non-binaries? You're like, edit. Don't touch that.
Yeah. And when we play with it, you find that people are really comfortable with the humility of being underneath God.
Yes.
It's come up in our dialogues many times, and especially earlier on. Or are you resonant with Source? And so we spoke about God for Source. That can be a convenient little bridge.
Sure.
Bridge to heaven. Yeah. I was trying to build to something else, actually. It'll come back if it's meant to.
It's interesting. I feel like, are you a child of God? Are you a piece of God? Are you... Because for me, like, if you are a child of God, well, I'm quite happy for my child to sit up here next to me. If you're a piece of God, well, it's you. So I guess that, you can sit up. Like, the comfortability without any ego whatsoever to put yourself in wonderment of the majesty of God, but also to not then subjugate yourself to being a piece of shit in its presence, I think is an amazing gift to give to yourself.
Are you saying both?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think both. I think both is really beautiful. And again, it lends itself to the duality of this plane. It lends itself to like a higher self and a human dichotomy, also like a God and a soul dichotomy, like the one when nothing could possibly be separate, and a deliberate individuation of that so it can turn around and explore itself, traverse its own oceans, Yeah, so it also, like, if you were just the child of God, there's all the wonder of humility, which would be really beautiful because you can let in a lot of help. You can go, I can't do this by myself. I need something bigger than me or something outside of me to assist me. And I think that's kind of plainly double-edged because you could really disempower yourself with that. Also, you could really have a wonderful realization moment of yourself being a lot larger by allowing something to rush in and offer an apparent third-party buoyancy, nourishing aid, like to be the child of God and allow God to aid you. I think it's obviously beautiful, and especially in a religious sense, there's countless moments of that, people reflecting that, like, let go and let God and let that happen, and their heart fills with love because they're allowing something to enter them. And perhaps someone of your or my disposition might say, well, you're actually allowing yourself to be filled up by yourself. That's why it feels so good. But it's like, it doesn't need notes. It doesn't need adjustments. It's an incredible moment of union with the divine, really. So wonderful that we would allow ourselves to be the child of God in one dimension, and then at the other end of the stick that we would subjugate ourselves hierarchically underneath God forever. And so that would be an idea that you have of yourself. The highest functional idea you have of who you are provides the ceiling. It's like, I can have a divine existence as a servant of God and live that way. But does that cap what you think you're capable of? Can you create in the same way if something else is always creating on your behalf? Can you co-create with God if you're the child? And some might say, of course, that's how it is. And you go, okay, cool. There would be others, though, that go, no, God, I don't decide. It's fated. I'm surrendered. There's no creativity. It's already set. And there are beautiful moments of that in many areas of spirituality from deeply authentic beings. And it's like allowing yourself to hold it in the most effective way in the moment, to swap methods, to be whatever's required. Similarly, if you only saw yourself as the highest expression of God, you could really bypass your individuation. And you could, the language I'm familiar with it around is like the Advaita trap. So Advaita being one of the arms of Hinduism, and it being about transcending duality. So non-dualist is another word. I think there's like non-religious denominations of non-dualism. I think Zen and maybe some other parts of Buddhism tend to be lopped in with the Buddhist version of Advaita. But yeah, the premise that so none of this is real. It's like pushing the matrix away. It's like working out it's a matrix and it's a simulation and wanting to push it away. Like none of this is real. Like I'm sitting here right now having a conversation as Luke with Paul, but there's only one of us here. So I'm not interested in the conversation. What's the point? So pushing away of duality because it's not real. So that might be an expression of that. It's really fascinating to play with. Yeah. There are beautiful moments of you could call it the death of the simulation, or you could call it the full expression of the simulation. So if you have a moment, if you covet feminine energy in your life, if you covet masculine energy in your life as a feminine expression, and then you have a moment of merger with it, be it esoterically through a shamanic practice or a religious practice or something more spiritual in a meditation setting or an energetic healing, or you find the love of your life and it is so nourishing, like lock and key fits together and you feel really complete in that moment, as if a soul entered this plane, you could say, or God individuated into this plane and took itself and split itself in a primary way into two. So if you take the one and split it into two, the first things that come up are masculine and feminine polarities. And then as if they spread themselves out across the world and in some form reunited and merged and became one again. That would be an example of the full realization of duality, where it's complete. It went to the efforts of separating itself so it could have the joy of refinding itself and reunifying. And so that would be the full expression of, So there's beautiful aspects to it.
Yeah.
But so much of what we're dialoguing about is like, yes, that and the other. Really meeting what it is to be individuated, really meeting what it is to be human.
I experienced this in that way of like, it finishes and I'm like, oh, what the fuck did we just talk about? I can remember some bits. We talked about failure and we spoke about like blah blah blah, and then you go back through and you're like, that's interesting.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like this, while you're, I don't think you can solidify it while
see the forest for the trees.
While
maybe?
You're in it, trying to solidify the system, and while it's playing out, I just think you can't. You just have to let it play out. It's literally like we're trying to write a song right now. I keep on bringing it back to music because that's my wheelhouse. But like in a song, you're not trying to go, oh, what type of song is this? You're like, just get it out.
Right.
You want to just get it out,
and you like the death
and you get the most
creativity.
You get the most out that you can at the time. I think Neil Finn talks about this. The juice of writing music is always like bring it out all the way to the end. Like melodies, counter melodies, harmonies. Are there underlick lines? Are there, what the chord progression is? What are the actual lyrics? Until you just hit a wall and you're like, I got nothing left. And that is always going to be the most potent part of the song. It's always, the rest of it is always like, I'm going to finish the verse. Yeah. And it's always like, this verse kind of sucks, but it's not as good as, but thank God I had that, that divine realization, or that gift that came down, or whatever you want to call it. And that feels like this process.
This feels like a really prickly thing to say. But do you think that making children's music is the opposite to that? Does that often look like? Do you think they sit around and flow inspiration about lollipops and big red cars?
100%.
Sick.
Yeah.
They're not just going like, screw it, let's just like
I think if you can engage with a really innocent, beautiful, pure part of yourself, then you will rock yourself into Big Red Car. You know what I mean? Like
you kind of you disappeared my brain into a wormhole with the Neil Finn thing, because I keep thinking of the lyrics of Distant Sun. It wasn't one of my favorite I was raised on a One Crowded House on Woodface, particularly One
really?
Crowded House album,
Which is Tim. Tim's as much as
the story. More than Tim than Neil.
No. It was
Lost
Tim writing. Tim was writing an album at the time, and Neil. I don't know if he had writer's block or not, but he just wasn't happy with what he'd made. I'm probably butchering this story, but and then I think Woodface, because Tim joined Crowded House, right, and Neil had joined Split Ends, which was Tim's band.
Yeah,
and so now Tim is joining Neil's band.
Yeah,
and they took maybe half, maybe Neil had 6 songs and Tim had 4 or something, they put both of the songs, all the songs together to make the album Woodface. So the Woodface album is actually a Finn Brothers record in the guise of production. In the guise of.
There's
of
definitely lighthearted stuff in there that might be more Tim.
I think, my gut feel is like Chocolate Cake poetry and stuff like that is Tim. And
there's a lot of pop culture references and stuff. It's like, it feels a bit Warhol-y. And
Tim's the more kooky. I love like some of Tim's writing in.
Probably gave some incredible balance to Neil. I've never really heard him speak or anything, but
he's like Nervous Breakdown and all that sort of like really edge of
like a cliched. No, cliched feels too harsh. It's just that archetype of, Robin Williams.
More fragile.
There's so many musical examples of it. People who are Bob Dylan. People who are incredibly capable of deep creative expression, new things coming out. But there's also they're wrapped up in so much anger and sadness to create that expression, which is interesting because so much in spirituality is about being with that stuff and perhaps journeying through it, perhaps not creating from it, and yet so much art is created from there, and it's so valid. It's an interesting sort of like. Not contradiction, but like point of tension that I perhaps wouldn't sit around and write about the great pains of my life, even though so many of my favourite songs.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to. It makes sense that that's how you're feeling it through, but it can feel like telling stories about keeping it alive. That's a really interesting dilemma to me in spiritual work is I want to really sit with the feeling of this stuff and sometimes use story to tease it up and out, but not tell story just to tell story. But that can also breed spiritual, normalized kind of in spiritual culture holdings around it. That's like, well, we don't want to tell the same old shit story. We want to get off this stuff. We want to get off this stuff. But we know that like you can't get off things
Well, not until you're ready.
You can't get off something until you're really ready. So where is the gap? Where is the nuance? What's the rub here? And the best I've got, there are things, I'm a big subscriber to the Abraham Hicks thing, as you know, and for the most part, they're pulling you towards, like, you don't want to revisit these thoughts. They deeply honour what it is to feel and work out exactly where you are on the human emotional scale, quite specifically, like, where are you in terms of rage versus shame versus guilt versus joy, and they've got a system for it. And so much of my life, the best spots are where I can feel my feelings fully. And I don't shut up about it, I guess. It feels like life fully lived, really feeling your feelings. I have not solved that because I've still like, no fire where I lit the spark, I am not afraid of the dark. Your words devour my heart and put me to shame. I lose my shit every time I play that on guitar. And I don't know why.
Because it speaks to in my opinion, it speaks to a really, really deep part of yourself, which Neil dug deep inside himself, and you honor that deep, like that depth. You can feel it,
I don't even need to know what it's about.
But that's the thing with music, we all make it something relevant to us. It only speaks to us when it means something about our existence. And that's the beautiful thing, like when... Like I can't speak for Neil Finn or any of those guys, but when you go out on stage and you play something, you're not reliving. Sometimes it happens, sure, and sometimes we get overwhelmed, but you're not reliving that experience over and over again. It's like you birth an egg, and then you go and show everyone the egg. It's a bad analogy.
You're saying like playing the same
there's a catharsis
set in a new place?
No, more that thing of like once, because there's a great catharsis in writing a song that's deeply personal about something you're going through. It almost like helps you move through it. It's why artists can't help but do it, because it becomes part of their their process of dealing with the intensity of their existence. At least that's my experience of it.
So how does what we're doing right now feel like
I'm not
art
talking.
to you?
I'm not talking about like pop songs, and I'm not talking necessarily about.
Yeah, let's get in some jabs. Let's get some jabs.
Well,
in.
I'm not talking about stuff that's written by committee, like 7 people. It's more like what sounds good, what's, like. But I'm more talking about that singer-songwriter kind of space where they are truly cracking their chest open. Sorry, what were you saying?
Well, I get, and yet what it feels like we're excluding from this dialogue is like, how about how some of the best writers are really not well?
Yeah.
What of that? How does that?
Because their neuroses
how does that interface with what we're up to as far as our own personal spiritual growth and what we say we're about?
I think because they're trying to get as much of it out, and and depending on, there's so many factors. It can be their childhood, it can be the influences, it can be their fascination with depth of expression, it can be all of and more of those things. That becomes their voice. The things that fascinate them, the things that, how driven they are, like how that's a big part of it. How driven are you to understand the depth of the translation of human language from one person to another? How artistic do you want to be? How well read do you want to be? How wide and diverse are your influences? Are you a collector? Are you pulling up shells off the beach and making collages from them? Are you inventing your own shell? There's so many different ways, and I think sometimes I have to be careful here because, like, for me, a lot of the really great artists have been unwell. I mean, it's mentally unwell.
Yeah, to the point of
but I don't
going off the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, but I don't feel like that's a necessity for creating great art when you understand, and I'm not saying that I've touched anywhere near to making great art like Neil Finn or whatever, but
Oh, thank God you decompressed the room by saying that.
But I think when you can reach out with honesty and authenticity into that space where we go to bring things back, the more honest you can be and the purer that excavation can be, the more worthy it is of expression, in my opinion.
Yeah. And yet it didn't seem to make these guys well.
No, but I mean, using
Neil
Finn as an example, I mean, Neil's fairly well-rounded and fairly,
there's a certain flavour of time.
Paul McCartney, like Paul's pretty well-rounded. Elton John's
but none of them
are
booze, and none of them are party animals like they were in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and
they have been
90s. But they were. Well,
they
were
just survived it, maybe.
Yeah, but now you do it and you perhaps don't do those things as much. I don't know.
Well, there's an evolution of consciousness going on at the same time too. We're not the same collective globule as we were in the 60s. We've been through a whole bunch of shit and we're affected by a whole bunch of more stuff.
Yeah. I guess, like, I think of Cobain and I think of Joplin, and I don't aspire.
Amy Winehouse.
I love their art. Oh, yeah.
27 Club.
Yeah, let's say all the members.
Hendrix.
Buckley was older. Elliott Smith was 27.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought Buckley might have been 30.
Right.
He started later. His dad died younger, I think. I can't remember when he died, but he was off the rails.
Have you read the book about the dad and the...
No, but I kind of... there was a time when they were hybridizing a lot of their songs and celebrating the merger of the two, which wasn't really a thing. Like,
no.
They were both dead, and then... essentially had nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
And from Jeff's point of view, wanted nothing to do. So with him, but the idea that you were then reuniting them despite them was something that people did to them, not that they did to themselves, which is probably okay, but it did feel like out of their hands.
He was Scotty Moorhead for a long time.
What's that?
What's his name?
Who?
Jeff Buckley.
Oh, right, because he avoided the name.
Stepdad, and I think Scott might be his middle name, maybe?
Right.
But yeah. This one's pretty big. It's a really short question, but it feels enormous, and I'm fascinated to hear what you would say. How do you know what your capacity is in each moment to manifest? See, it's just a tiny question, but there's massive implications.
So, a lot of presumptions in it too. Okay, so this concept of manifestation, we'll presume they mean it, I don't know, in the New Agey sense, which is to say that you are capable of co-creating phenomena with the universe, the idea that things aren't just happening randomly, that we, two things, have the ability to influence what materializes, and the other insight would be that we are always influencing what materializes. So the invitation being, hey, whether you engage in it consciously, directly, and participatorily or not, you are shaping your outcome. So we said before, like, the greatest limitation in your life is the highest functional idea of who you think you are. Kudos to Neil Donald Walsh. Who you believe yourself to be in your essence. Like, who are you actually underneath all the roles? Similarly, you cannot manifest wealth through the avenues you might really desire to if you don't think that you can. Whether you think it's true or you don't, either way you are right. That's not the quote. You know the quote? Whether you think it is so or it isn't, whether you think it's possible or it isn't possible, either way you are correct. So the premise that what you hold to be true is true. And for me, this parallels beautifully, or echoes in a complement, in a symbiotic way, or in a resonant way, is what I mean to say, that God's creative and so are you, whether you like it or not. So the premise being, like, you could imagine you're just a human person, but your divine essence doesn't have that luxury. Like, it knows it is divine. So it has the ability to influence environment. So if you think that relationships are meant to be hard work, so be it. If you think that wealth flows to you because of what you are, not because of what you do, because your essence is inherently enough, and so circumstances of enough, let's rephrase, if you understand that your nature is fulminating with provisioning, like that what you are is not just enough but more than enough, it's plentiful, you can relax and afford to live like every day is a holiday or something in your heart because there's more than enough love there. You don't have to operate from scarcity in terms of love. Let's say that that's interchangeable with wealth as well. So if you believe that wealth, because of your divine essence being inherently abundant, then wealth comes to you like a moth to the flame, like resonant energies are drawn to you in that way, then that's how it will play out. I don't know that we need to offer specific examples to that end. The question of whether you think that is true, a lot of these questions don't really enter a lot of traditional spiritual and religious planes. I suppose they do in their way, but they don't feel like they're a primary part of it. To me, the deliberate manifestation is something that's emerged from the New Age. We were talking last week about this concept of a first or a second stage enlightenment. The first one being where you think you're separate from everyone else and you realize that you're interconnected with all of us, and you start to live from that more and more. From the point of view of the human family, but also connection to nature. And you sort of realize that the divine essence underneath the tree is the divine essence under you. The Namaste principle in Sanskrit that we all know through, the westernization of yoga, like Hatha yoga, but in its essence is that underneath all your human roles and identities and functions that you would draw personality from, build personality around, and underneath all of mine, we are the same being. Not just that we're made of the same divine essence, made of the same stardust, but we're actually the same thing. You might even say we're actually the same person. And when you say namaste, it is to honor that part of you, and to honor that, and I receive it from you as honoring that part of me. Good Lord, why did I start talking about that? I just totally disappeared in the namaste thing. Talking about manifestation, we were talking about.
So I want to cut what you just said and just like have it on loop playing in my headphones.
The Namaste deal.
No. The pre, like,
Manifestation.
when you were saying like, and whether you think you have it or you don't, you're right.
Mm.
In
That's
both
a
of
really
those
old one.
things.
I think it's a Western quote.
It's great. Like,
Yeah, I didn't get the language quite right, but that's in there. So I said that, and it'll come back. It's like, this is it. It's like I tried to super glue so many different things together because it felt beautiful, and here we are. So now we're in this in-between space. I can't even find the question. I feel so expanded inside of me that it's so lovely, but I don't know how to, I was going to say land the ship. I've jumped out on a parachute. I've got to get back in the plane.
do you want the question again?
No, it'll come back because he actually she or whatever specifically asks your capacity to manifest in a moment, and I want to get to the specificity of the question, but we're sort of defining manifestation in the short term or in the.
I was buzzing on like what you were saying.
Me too much. So
that's like,
oh yeah, that's what I was. I knew it would come. So we were referencing the first and second stage enlightenments last week. The first one is about awakening to the fact that there's only one of us in the room and the interconnectedness of consciousness underneath things and how exquisitely beautiful that all is. And it's as if there's a concept actually in Buddhism, called the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva, which is usually anthropomorphized as Kuan-Yin. You'll see a lot of, in the Buddhist world, Southeast Asia particularly, you see a lot of these beautiful feminine statues pouring milk, I think. And there's usually babies around. This exquisite maternal goddess. Her essence or her compulsion, her like primal momentum in the world, in life, in terms of energetics, what she's all about is that she got off the karmic wheel in the Buddhist sense. She completed all of her spiritual work and cleaned up all her current and past lives muck and transmuted it into divine openness and clarity and power and love. And then was gifted the opportunity to get off the karmic wheel, as all enlightened beings are. But upon stepping off it, if you like, I don't know, it's not a physical wheel, but like in the process of doing so, turned around and saw all the poor little babies suffering, all the poor human beings crying in their misunderstanding of who they really are, and could not leave, couldn't bring herself to leave. So she elected to stay. And those are the incredibly rare beings that attain enlightenment in the Buddhist model, the exponentially rarer, I wonder if that's the right language, the even rarer creatures that decide that they'll actually not cash in their credits and check out and be with God eternally, but stay here and help the rest. And so this profound teacher model. And so knowing that structure, I suppose, when we talk about the second stage enlightenment, and again, like we said last week, I'm not offering this as objective, I don't know, spiritual doctrine or something that someone should subscribe to as factual, but just as models to play with. If it's resonant, great. If it's not, put it down. It's not important to you. But the idea being that the second stage enlightenment is knowing that you're a spiritual being having a human experience and reawakening, you could say. You've already had an awakening of consciousness in your third eye, and then having a more feminine intentionality of enlightenment for this life. Like you want to grow on that plane, on that arc, and that looks like opening to a more and more human experience. Yeah, I know this isn't really the truth of who I absolutely am in a divine sense, but I'm strong enough and big enough to afford myself a really full human experience. So I'm going to dilate and open to an ever bigger feeling experience of this life. And in doing so, it's like I'm a God having a human experience. I'm going to funnel more and more divinity into this human plane. And to me, this is a very long way around, and I apologize for that. I don't apologize, but I honor the fact that thanks for listening, because I've taken the long way around. But that is to me, that's the birth of deliberate manifestation, the birth of conscious co-creation. God creates the universe as a natural machine of arising phenomena. It just pumps this out, and that we as individuations of the divine can be co-creative in that process. And it's interesting to me because it feels like the New Age movement has birthed this concept of deliberate manifestation through, Abraham Hicks and The Secret and these other real like, modern phenomena, and they can be dilute and overproduced and Hollywoodified and all these different things. But the essence of it, I think, is a consequence of the evolution of spirituality. The Kuan-Yin thing I mentioned is interlaced. It's just some of my musings, I guess, and it's interlaced insofar as like it used to be a rare phenomenon that somebody would choose to do that. To me, to choose to leave and never come back, leave the plane of duality because you've done the spiritual work and you're enlightened, you're free now. You don't need to go through the torture of coming back. One might hold it that way. The Kuan-Yin phenomenon being that she turns around and wants to come and do it again. And to me, that's what's going on in that second stage enlightenment. It's as if everybody doing a second stage enlightenment is doing a Kuan-Yin dance in that way. That's why I mention her. So that is to explain my relationship to co-creativity in terms of turning vibration into material, into materialism or something. Taking things that aren't yet in form and influencing their shaping so that you can influence material outcome. Essentially, you can create anything you want in physical form if you tap into its creativity, which is to say that the clumping together of energies that happens vibrationally precedes the clumping together of actual form. So we can be involved, hands in the clay, as they say in the Abraham Hicks movement, hands in the clay, we can be involved in the creative process. Does that feel like a worthy enough background?
Yeah.
Cool. So then, coming back to the question, I think it was, how do I know how available to vibrational creation or to manifestation I am?
Capacity, yeah.
What's my capacity in a given moment? So if we are actually saying moment to moment, then I think it's as simple as where are you on the vibrational scale of expansion? So if you're really expanded, you'll find that you have, you could say that you're in touch, you are in training, you are entraining deep aspects of yourself. You are channeling your higher self in a way. Channeling was both taboo but also kind of like mystical and fringe in its way, that it was a very select, the way that I held it, the concepts like psychic capacities and your capacity to channel other things, and just playing with, like, I think in some ways what Paul and I are doing here by working each other into a lather through deep dive conversation and allowing more and more authentic and more kind of, consciousness intoxicated beings to come to the fray and then speak from there, and we have a great time doing it, and maybe others get something from enjoying that, maybe not. But that is, to me, we're channeling our higher selves, and that might actually be what the most fun version of living looks like, is allowing these deep aspects to come to the surface and to roam around and to live from there. So we're really human in our function, and that's alive and taken care of, and we're really honoring these unlimited depths because we're operating from there too. Yeah, so where are you in that vibrational scale has a lot to do with what you can hold. And I think that's quite evidenced in the moment, because I know for me that I worry a lot more, and that's a sign of, I worry more if my vibration is lower, because all of a sudden the realities of, will I have enough to pay the bills, and are my relationships safe? Am I supported? Am I a dickhead? Is my way of being in the world self-entitled or pathetically needy or whatever arises? And those things are water off a back's duck if I'm really... Did I say that right?
No, but it's awesome. Let me get this straight. There's a duck on your back. And what?
Just for the audience's sake, how does the duck get the water off a duck's back? You have no evidence to prove that I said it any other way. So it's water off a duck's back if I'm expanded. That's a way of measuring it. So we talk all this, waffly stuff about vibration. So easy to get lost in esoteric language. It's criminal to stay lost in esoteric language in my world. Dogmatic and bypassy, and you're diluting exquisite functional language. Actually, I know it's also hard sometimes to contract these lofty concepts into form enough to communicate them. Sometimes it can be hard to corral infinity into a box so you can exchange about it, or exchange upon it, or whatever the word is, talk about it. I don't know what I'm saying, but what if it ducks back if I'm really expanded? And when I'm not, it can really stick and then create process. That is in some things I've got to process. It's great evidence because you're like, oh, that's where I'm at. So I'm not that expanded. Inversely, when we're expanded, limitation may not completely dissolve, but can get pretty damn dilute. So all of a sudden the concept of like, I'm going to be, you might switch from somewhere in the middle, like I'm going to be okay financially. Things always work out. Something comes up. I'm a resourceful guy. I could always work harder. I used to function from that so much. My baseline was if things got really bad, I'd just work really hard. I just do overtime. I just work a lot harder. And that was a way for me to be able to soothe the anxious parts of me enough to facilitate the idea of manifestation. I could kind of like satiate those and pat them on the head and rub their back enough that they would recede enough that I could play in the other spaces. So I guess it was healthy as that stuff was coming online, but at some point I had to do away with it and risk just generating provisioning from, gentler places. Anyway, sidetrack, but when we're really expanded, possibility enters, and all of a sudden you might go from, it's hard to, we're going to make it through somewhere in the middle band, the low band being, the low end being like, we are so fucked. I don't know how we're going to do this. And all of a sudden stress is permeating the whole life, the whole house, all the relationships, the children are indirectly affected by it. Those things are very human. At the other end of the scale, when the consciousness is really expanded, possibility is triumphantly high, and you'll feel it if you play with this enough. All of a sudden you're like, hundreds and millions of dollars are easy to manifest. And I'm talking about money. It can feel antithetical to spiritual practice, all these lofty concepts we're traversing, and the truth is wealth is a part of that as well. If you can allow unlimited amounts of love to flow through your heart, you can allow unlimited amounts of provisioning to flow through your heart too. And that can take the physical form of a beautiful human relationship, or a beautiful human community, or a beautiful place in nature to enjoy, or a beautiful moment over the ocean, or a beautiful pile of money in your back pocket or something. Scrooge McDuck gold coin freestyle swimming in your backstroke in your basement, or like whatever. Like the truth is that God has no judgment about it. There's murkiness in the seeking validation of being able to show everybody else your wealth, but that's your shit. That's not the universe's shit. The universe has no designs on limiting what can come into your life. The premise being that you put the ceiling on it with the vibrational or the belief system that you cultivate inside of you. So it's a wonderful invitation to say the next time you're really expanded and I feel fucking wonderful today, and I'm not telling anybody about it because I don't want to dilute it. I'm noticing that I feel 11 out of 10 good. Ponder what's possible in areas of interest to you. Ponder what an apex relationship would look like. Ponder what an apex financial dynamic would look like. And you'll notice that, okay, similarly, when things aren't great, you'll notice that possibility is low. So rounding that all out, I'll borrow from Abraham Hicks because their system of manifestation is the best, I reckon, as far as a practicum. And what they say is when you're really expanded, get specific. When you're really contracted, they use different language. What do they say? I forget. It doesn't matter. When your energy is high, when you feel great, get specific. So you might say, I want this house on this hill, mortgage-free, kids playing, this spouse arm in arm, looking over the ocean as the sun sets. A specific, these timbers inlaid in the window frame, this kind of mower in the yard. I'm sure these apparently benign and random choices are very reflective of me. A big lawn mowing enthusiast or something. But the point is that the universe has no judgments. You could say, that utter expansion is the same as saying utter spaciousness. Like a blank space you get to fill. Yes, like a blank check you get to, allot the funds to and then sign yourself. Yes, like you get to one thing, working with different people in different relational spaces, essentially having conversations about what's possible in a relationship, so that you can cut and paste all your favorite aspects of the opposite sex, and for those looking for a spouse, and you can cut and paste them without shame and amalgamate them all together into your dream person. It's if a child wanted to do that about their dream bicycle, we would put it up on the fridge, pride of place. But we get in our own way with human guilt and shame around this stuff, around people and money. But they're as divine as anything else. And they're also as pedestrian as anything else. So the answer to the question, what is my capacity? How do I know my capacity to manifest in that moment? You'll know it by the quality of the feeling inside of you, the level of expansion that you can get in touch with. If you feel wonderfully expanded, go specific. And if you don't, go really general. So that's the other end of it. So contemplating a specific house and the different features or the different aspects of a human being that you would love to bring into your world to dance with, because you feel really worthy of that kind of resonant life experience. So as an example of going general, then you contemplate something that has no charge. So whether it's your children, I choose my children often in these esteems because it just feels like a bottomless reservoir of love that's easy and uncharged and unconflicting. And so you contemplate that. But sometimes the kids drive me crazy. So you don't contemplate that. You contemplate the ocean, or you contemplate a moment in time. You just go general, keep it non-specific. And the idea being you can kind of turn that ship gently and notice as the vibration turns up. And the two things that are really important about that is giving yourself permission to allow your desires as fully as you possibly can. To me, that's like that second stage enlightenment inflection I'm here to have the fullest human experience I can. How much of this can I let in? Because desire has so much to say. All the different desires, sexual, financial, creative, relational, spiritual, all the different desires have everything to say about who you are and where you're at. And they're all so beautiful. I would say that they may be the most communicative and informative pieces of information about the energy signature of your soul, which is what you came here to unfold. Yeah, I was building to something else. I was talking about desire. It's all very intoxicating. What will we do?
That feels like a good place.
Just have one question this week?
Yeah, feels like a good place to pull over.
Okay.
Nice.
It happened. I was, yeah.
We've had a bit of that, this one, where we just kind of go into that deep space. It's beautiful, man. Yeah, well done.
Okay.